Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another vlog. Today, and actually yesterday and tomorrow, we are in the Ottawa kind of area. We went to the Upper Canada Village yesterday. I keep getting notifications from my phone saying that our cats have moved because we have like cameras that motion detect, so I can like see them moving around the house to make sure they're okay. I always love going on road trips with Jeremy because we end up talking about so much, and the 2-hour drive here was like super blissful. We got into some really deep conversations about how we want to raise Rosie. Then we got to Upper Canada Village, had some lunch with his family, and then we walked around. It's always so beautiful. I really feel like if you're in Quebec or if you're in Ontario, then it's definitely something that you have to see. It really brings you back in time, makes you think of things in a new perspective. There's a lot of little key insights that they give you as you're touring the village that just make you think about things then versus now. Sometimes you kind of feel almost nostalgic for a time that you never even really lived in or experienced. It's really interesting how it can make you feel. I am excited to bring Rosie there one day, see what kind of catches her eye, if it's the gardening like me, or if it's more of like the blacksmith part like Jeremy, or if it's the architecture like Jeremy's stepdad, or the sewing, which is also something that really captured my eye. But yeah, it'll just be nice to see where her interests are in the future and then be able to nurture those things as she grows up. So now we're staying at a B&B. It's actually super cute. It's like an old style kind of B&B in the sense that it's like a really big house that has rooms rented out. So we rented out 3, super cozy. Today, I'm not sure what we're doing yet. I think we are possibly going to go to a vineyard. I tried to put on a dress that I had specifically planned to wear to the vineyard, and I told myself that when I was pregnant I really wanted to wear it to the baby shower. So now fast forward a year later, my baby shower is probably around the corner and I actually can't get it to zip on the side, which I was not expecting at all. So I'm going with overalls and hopefully that's fancy enough for the vineyard.
Yeah, it was like super popular here. The Samsung, those things are supposed to break and they get hot.
I've had some good days, and I've had some worse, but none compared to the days that I've had with you.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And I've had some high times, and I've had some curves, but none compared to the times that I've
It's really good, baby.
I'd take out alone for just one day alone, to run back the time in slow motion. I'd sell my guitars, I'd spend life behind bars, to take one more trip through the story night. 'Cause this was the best day of my life. Thanks for the best day of my life.
It's good now.
Yeah, it's good.
It's good.
You gonna go, babe?
Good, that didn't take long.
You. Don't wet me.
For Rosie. Don't wet me. Yeah, that's.
I didn't want to go.
Wow.
It's like those pastors that like start preaching, but everything rhymes. Everyone's like, yeah, but then if you actually like hear what they're saying, you're like, it's kind of weird. Yeah. Rhythm. You convert people with the sound of music. What are you recording me?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
At this point in our story, we just finished off at the beach and then we went to a theater show. And I have a whole other story about that, but I won't get into it because there's just too much to talk about right now. So after the theater show, we went back to the B&B. We ended up getting some Greek food for dinner. And this is kind of where things start to take a turn. We were at dinner and I started to feel like this tightness in my belly area. And what it feels like is kind of like the sides of your stomach. It feels like the skin is just like pulling. And so during dinner, and this has never happened before, I literally moved my chair back, got on my knees, had my hands on the chair, and I was like just trying to like move. Like I don't know exactly what I was trying to do, but I just ended up in that position trying to just get a little bit more comfortable in my abdomen area. I went and lied down on the couch for a little bit, and then everyone ended up wanting to have an early night and go to bed early, so everyone kind of retreated to their own rooms. So I go to the bathroom one last time before I end up going to sleep because, you know, pregnant ladies have to pee all the time. And then I wipe and there's blood. Not a significant amount of blood, but there's still blood nonetheless. I'm in my 3rd trimester, and of course my jaw just drops and I'm like, what? Like, why is this happening right now? We go get his mom upstairs, who was sleeping, and she comes down and I'm like in shock. I don't know what to do. Of course, I start panicking. I start worrying. I decide to contact my midwife. Wasn't able to get a hold of her because it was her off week. I tried to contact the midwife who was on call. For some reason, I wasn't able to get through with the pager and whatnot. So I ended up contacting another midwife who was like my 2nd midwife, and she picked up. So she told me, you know, like, it's not worth the risk. You should try to get to a hospital. But as you know, we are in Ontario at this point, and I am from Quebec. So we decided to find the closest hospital. We find one that's about 25 minutes from us in Ontario. When we get there, we find out that in Ontario, we have to pay for the services, and then there's a chance that the government refunds us, but possibly not the full amount, and it's just very unclear. And as you might know, hospital bills can like rack up really fast, and so for us to cover like thousands of dollars of bills at the hospital, it just wasn't realistic. And so we decided to drive 25 minutes back to our B&B and to pack up really quickly. Actually, Jeremy's mom helped us pack everything while we were on the road, and we decided to head back to Quebec. So we drove an hour across the Quebec border and went to the closest hospital there. Now at this point, I'm in the car and I'm thinking, is this a waste of time? Like, am I panicking for nothing? I've had spotting in the past with this pregnancy. Like, I've had it at 5 weeks and I had it around 13 weeks. And I'm just wondering, like, I feel fine. So is this a waste of time? But at the same time, I don't want to risk anything because it is later in the pregnancy. And so at the same time of all those thoughts of feeling like nothing's wrong, am I wasting my time? I'm also thinking of all the things that could go wrong at this point. Like, what if there's an emergency and I have to get an emergency C-section? What if she is in distress? What if we get there and I go into labor? Like, there was just like so many thoughts crossing my mind, and it was at this point 11 p.m. So it was the middle of the night, and my not worst fear, but the thing that I really hoped would not happen is that I would ever go into labor in the middle of the night, because I am a person who really needs her sleep. So it was just like very overwhelming. We were in the car. At some point I was just like, there's not much I can do anymore. We're on the way to the hospital, and I can't keep thinking of all the negative things that could happen. So I just ended up turning up the music that Jeremy and I were listening to and just like singing and just trying to like release some energy because I was stressed. So we get to the hospital around midnight, 12:30. We go to the emergency and then they take us in and we sit down, and at this point, like, I'm just fed up, I'm tired, and I really don't think anything's gonna happen. I think that they're just gonna send us home, and I'm even thinking maybe we could drive back to the B&B in Ontario. So we go into the emergency, into the triage, where they tell us like where we have to go and get our basic information. And I tell them I'm 28 weeks pregnant tomorrow, and these are my symptoms. Like, I had a bit of bleeding, and my midwife told me to come here and not to risk it. And so she calls up to the maternity ward and she's like, yeah, we have a lady here. She's 28 weeks. She just has a bit of spotting. She's not having any contractions. Like, I think it'll be something quick. I'm going to send her up. So I'm like, cool. We're going to be out of here in like an hour, you know, thinking that everything's fine. So we go upstairs. We meet somebody. Jeremy goes gets my hospital card because this is a hospital that we've never been to. I kind of bring them up to date with my file, with my pregnancy, with health issues, that kind of stuff. And then they give me a robe and they give me a little jar to pee in so that they can test my pee. And she tells me to put the robe on. I sit down on like on the table chair thing. Jeremy's back. The woman comes in. She hooks me up to this like the monitor thing. It's like 2 belts that go around your waist. One of them monitors the heart rate of the baby. The other one monitors contractions, which at this point, I had no idea. They didn't tell me anything. I had no idea what these straps were. There's a little machine printing paper beside me, and I have no idea what's happening. So I'm lying there. She puts those things on me, and then she puts the thing that measures your blood pressure on my arm. And she measures my blood pressure. And then she starts measuring my blood pressure again a second time, but she gives me a clicker first. And she's like, when you feel pressure, press the clicker. And then she starts the blood pressure machine. And I'm like, when I feel pressure? I'm like, when I feel pressure where? In my arm? Like, when it gets too tight, am I supposed to click this button? Like, I had no idea what she meant. And I was like, what do you mean pressure? And she's like, you can't talk. And I was like, what? And then I was just sitting there with this clicker, like, pressure, like, where? I don't even know what I'm looking for. Like, why would I feel pressure anywhere? Is it just the tightening of the band? And then I kind of look at Jeremy. I'm like, what does she mean? And he's like, I don't know. And then she's like, you can't talk again. So I'm just like, what? Meanwhile, she's beside me and she's looking at these papers, just like printing out of the machine. And she's looking at them and she's looking at me. She's looking at them, she's looking at me. I'm sitting there with the clicker like this. Looking at the paper, looking at me. And then she says, you know you're having very big contractions right now. And I'm like, what? And she's like, yes, you don't feel them? And I'm like, not really. And then as I'm saying not really, I'm lying on my back, so I'm like pretty much straight. I kind of like clench upwards so that my stomach's flat, my legs go up, and my head goes up. And I start laughing, like laughing. I'm like, oh my God, she's moving so much. She's being so silly right now. Because Rosie's like a super active baby, and like I feel this kind of stuff quite often, like with her just like moving and everything. So I'm like, I start laughing so much. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's being so funny right now. Like, she's so active. And then she's like, you're having a huge contraction. And I'm like, what? And I'm just like in disbelief. And so she shows me like kind of like on the paper, and I kind of start seeing, and kind of, I'm in shock, right? And then I start realizing like, holy shit, I'm having contractions. And not like Braxton Hicks contractions. And the reason I know this is because I was like, oh, I'm having Braxton Hicks. Like, oh, so funny, like, great. And she's like, these aren't Braxton Hicks contractions. She's like, you're having regular contractions. At this point, they were lasting, I didn't know this yet. I was told later on in the night, but they were lasting like 30 to 40 seconds, and they were every 2 minutes. So, and like on the paper, all you see is like the big line go up, a straight line, then it would go down. Big line go up, straight line, go down. And it was like that for like quite a long time throughout the night. And I didn't feel them. Well, like I felt it, but I didn't really feel it that much. It was just like, to me, it was super normal. And I didn't realize that's what a contraction was. And it wasn't like painful. It was just like tightening. So anyways, they were like, okay, well, we're going to have to hospitalize you. What we're going to do is we're going to give you a room, bring Jeremy a bed as well. And then we're going to give you an IV drip. So basically they like emptied like 3/4 of a bag, honestly, in 30 minutes through the IV drip. And they also took blood samples. They also took a swab to see if I had any infections. And they did a urine test. So they just did like a bunch of tests to see if I had any infection going on, and if that was what was causing the contractions. And they were hoping that with like the IV, that would stop the contractions as well, because being dehydrated can cause it, apparently. They installed a catheter into my arm, which terrifies me. I was like, do I have to? They're like, we can't force you to do anything, but it could really help this situation. So obviously I did it, because like I want everything to be okay. And so yeah, she puts the catheter in, does the blood samples, I get the IV drip. And then I'm in the room with the machine, the monitor around my belly. And that's when I could finally like really start seeing what she meant by the contractions, because I was really like watching my tummy at that point, and I could see it like contracting up, holding. We actually started timing the contractions, me and Jeremy, and then releasing. And also I didn't know that when you're counting like the time between contractions, you count from the beginning of one contraction to the beginning of the next contraction. I was counting from the end of one contraction to the beginning of the next one. So it was more like 3 minutes apart, I think. I could really like see the contractions, and I got to understand in the amount of time, because it was quite long, what a contraction was, what it felt like, how to identify it. And we came to realize that I was probably actually having contractions for a few weeks, maybe even before this, because I always thought Rosie was just like pushing her head really strong into my tummy or like her butt or something. And that's what I was feeling, and it would always make me laugh. But actually it was contractions, most likely. Oh, I forgot to say, I also had to get like an internal cervical exam 3 times during that night. And that hurt more than anything. The first time that the doctor did it, I thought that it was like an ultrasound, because she had just done an ultrasound. I keep forgetting details. She had just done an ultrasound on my tummy. She saw that my placenta was good. The baby was head first. And then I thought she was going to do a transvaginal ultrasound with like the long machine thing. And I have done that already during this pregnancy, so I wasn't worried. But then she goes in with her fingers, and she goes so far and pushes so hard. I was screaming. I was swearing. That hurt more than anything, and I wasn't expecting it. Back to the hospital room, like my room where we were hospitalized. I am sitting in there, and she's doing all of the tests and stuff, and I'm talking. I'm cracking jokes. Yeah, at this point, it was 4 o'clock in the morning almost. And she was like, you need to like chill and calm down, because we need to get these contractions to stop. So between 4:30 and 6:30, I slept, dozed off on and off. I tried to like turn every little while, because like my hips were sore, my back was hurting from the contractions. Then I had another cervical exam, and at that point, it was like the most painful thing in the world, because she did it. That one hurt so bad. I was like squeezing Jeremy's hand and just like, I don't know, it was very painful. When she pulled her fingers out, like I was like in tears, and then literally just like blood started running out of my vagina. Just like, it was crazy. So she had to like wipe me up with like towels, or a towel, and then I was like staining the sheet under me as well. So that was like not fun at all. By this point, the contractions after having slept and everything had calmed down, so there wasn't those big spikes anymore. There was like little tiny ones every once in a while. They weren't regular anymore, so that was a good sign. The doctor came to see us around 9 a.m. He went over all my tests. There was no infection or anything. The contractions had stopped, so, or they hadn't stopped, but they weren't regular and they weren't big contractions anymore. Things kind of like relaxed a little bit. And then he just told me basically like that I had a threatened preterm labor. Thankfully my cervix never opened, so I had the contractions but no cervical opening, so I didn't go into full labor, which is obviously great. So for now, that's obviously something that I have to keep an eye on, especially considering that I don't really feel the contractions the way that most people would. He also said like no more like working out, no more hiking, no more like long yoga sessions and whatnot. So that unfortunately has to come to an end. He said to just relax, like at least for the next week, no intercourse, like wait to be cleared by the midwife at least. We have to cancel our upcoming camping trip because it's on a remote island, and because if ever this happened again in the middle of the night, we wouldn't be able to get off of the island, because it's the middle of the night and it's dark and there's the waters and the waves, and so it would be really dangerous. It's 3 hours away from here, so it's just not worth the risk. Then I got discharged from the hospital, so they let me go. I have a midwife appointment on Monday. We'll go over like all my tests and what happened, and she'll check me, see like where we're at and everything. Thankfully, I can still continue with the midwife. She said as long as you don't actually go into labor, like full-on labor where your cervix is opening during the pregnancy, then I can continue with her. Right now at this point, according to the doctor, he said every additional week that I can keep her in really has a significant meaning on like her development and everything. So I just need to relax and rest as much as possible to just keep myself from contracting and whatnot. So trying to take it really, really easy. Yesterday I slept from 1 p.m. until I think it was 4 p.m. And then I fell back asleep at 6 p.m. until 11 p.m. And then I fell back asleep from 12:30 at night all the way this morning until 7:30. Obviously it's worrisome for the next while, and people might think like, oh, it was just Braxton Hicks kind of thing, which it definitely wasn't. And I asked the doctor and every nurse that came in, and all of them said, this is not Braxton Hicks. You are having regular, very strong contractions. So there's kind of that, like just feeling like a little bit like I need to validate what I went through and like that whole experience and how scary it can be and how worrisome it could be. And there's also just the worry of like, will I go back into that situation where I'll have another threatened premature labor? So it's just nerve-wracking. I'm also nervous, like what if I don't catch it on time, because I didn't know I was having contractions, such big contractions and such regular contractions before. There's a few worries, of course, that I have. It also feels like it's going to be a long few months. I should maybe have my hospital bag ready just in case things like this happen. There's just a lot, I guess, playing on my mind. My battery's going to die. That is my 21-minute update on what happened and why I ended up in the hospital. I have to go now. Please don't forget to subscribe. I don't want the battery to die and to lose all this footage. I will see you next week with another video. Bye, guys.